welcome back to the channel. This is MTG Ghoul Dude, and we're gonna cover the good, the bad, the ugly, and the quite frankly kind of bizarre mounts that we got in Thunder Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Now, I might be also be rating and commentating on some of these strange combinations of creatures that we got. So, buckle up because it's gonna be a wild ride. So let's go on ahead and start off with the Bridled Bighorn. For 3 generic and a white, you get a 3/4 sheep mount. It has vigilance, and whenever it attacks while saddled, create a 1/1 white sheep creature token. And it saddles for 2. So it's pretty much crew if you're new to the whole vehicles and all that other weird stuff. On a scale of ride or walk, I would ride this one. It doesn't look like it'd be too uncomfortable, but it looked like we'd be hopping some mountains. But other than that, it seems like a pretty good little ride to take through the desert. Why it creates a sheep token? I mean, it is a sheep and sheep roaming herds. I guess that fits. Moving on to the Trained Arnyx. It is a cat beast that could have just been better off left as just a cat without the horns coming out of its neck. But for 1 and a white, you get a 3/1. And whenever it attacks while saddled, it gains first strike until end of turn, and then you scry 1 and it saddles for 2. I don't know. Them horns are kind of off-putting to me. I'm kind of an aesthetic type person too, where if it's like, it's got to be smooth and clean, and this one it's kind of messy a little bit. It's fierce though. I definitely ride this one. Definitely would have to be careful because cats have a temper. Bounding Felidar for 5 and a white. It's a 4/7. Now this right here, this is the epitome of a cat beast mount. 100% wood saddle. Whenever it attacks while saddled, you put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. And as long as you can keep it going, you can keep mounting those counters if you can get this out early enough to where you can actually swing with it. And it does saddle for 2. And the second line is you gain 1 life for each of those creatures you put a counter on, pretty much. So, yeah, this would be a good inclusion to Selesnya or Abzan counter lists. +1/+1 counters if you really care about those kind of counters for your decks. Yeah, this one's probably going to be one of my favorites. Now we move on to Fortune. Fortune. I don't know how you would want to pronounce it. Loyal Steed. For 2 and a white, it's a 2/4 beast mount. So this is kind of like a mix between a deer and a goat and something else, because this looks kind of gnarly in the face. But when it enters the battlefield, you scry 2 whenever it attacks while saddled. At the end of combat, exile it, and up to 1 target one creature that saddled it this turn. Return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. This seems like it would be really good in blink type decks that you would want to have your creatures entering the battlefield and leaving. And if you could find a way to keep getting it through, you keep consistently getting those ETBs or LTBs, depending on, what type of deck you wanted to build it around. Ride or walk. I might have to walk on this one, because it looks kind of creepy to me. But this is far from the creepiest thing that we're going to see today. Archmage's Newt. Ugh. This one is hard to look at. For 1 and a blue, it's a 2/2 Salamander mount. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, target instant or sorcery in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. That card gains flashback 0 until end of turn instead if it was saddled. And it does saddle for 3. I would definitely, unless I know I'm going to be running some rivers, I might have to walk on this one. But I will say the ability to cast instant or sorceries from the graveyard with flashback or flashback 0 is still great. And in the commander format, we do have or in just any format in general, we do have a lot of 3 power creatures. So it's not as bad as long as you can keep getting it through with like Skulk or something, and you can keep constantly playing your spells back from the graveyard. Spellslinger decks will probably like this, but probably won't run it because it takes up a spell slot. Instead of this, you could run Mizzix Mastery and just do it all over again anyway. Or you could run a counterspell in its spot. Yeah, definitely would have to walk on this one unless I know I'm going through some water. Caustic Bronco. This is a definite, right off the bat, this is a walk. This is as it is. Snakes are temperamental, just like the horse that it's part of. It's part snake, part horse. No, I am not riding on that where it can look back at me while it's running and cop an attitude with me. No, this just ain't happening. Caustic Bronco for 1 and a black. This is a 2/2 snake horse mount. Whenever it attacks, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. You lose life equal to that card's mana value if it isn't saddled. Otherwise, each opponent loses that much life instead. So this is like a Dark Confidant if it isn't saddled, and a Twilight Prophet if it is saddled. I mean, it's not bad, but you got to find a way to give it some evasion or it's not going to get through. And it does saddle for 3. Quilled Charger for 3 and a red. This is a 4/3 porcupine mount. And this would probably have to be a walk for me too. Porcupines, if you know anything about porcupines, their quills are dangerous. And if this can shoot out any quills as like a attack response, you could get caught in the crossfire. But whenever it attacks while saddled, it gets +1/+2 and gains menace until end of turn. This one, I don't think this one will be run very often unless it's just in the mount decks. I have not seen a X red mount deck yet, but I feel like this will probably be the only home for it if it does have a home, or a tap creatures deck. Sorry. Gila Courser for 2 and a red. This is a 4/2. When it attacks while saddled, exile the top card of your library until end of your next turn. You may play that card, and it does saddle for 1. This would be good if you're trying to... This would go good in a Prosper deck. It does have its high power to where you might not want to... Your opponents might not want to block it, but at the same time, it does get you that exile to where you could play it for Prosper. Any other decks, I don't see a lot of use for it. But I mean, it could see some play in non-mount decks. Ride or walk would have to... it's a lizard. You can tell where I'm from by where I'm looking at the temperament of the animal. I would probably have to pass. I mean, the environment, I wouldn't need it, but I don't think I would be in an environment where I would have to be cliff jumping from rock to rock. And now we come across Calamity, Galloping Inferno for 4 and 2 red. This is a 4/6 legendary creature horse mount. So this can be your commander. I don't know, because I don't feel like the heat from Calamity, and I feel like this should have been typed as skeleton horse, because you can see the bones in its legs. And I mean, I know it's charred past all existence everywhere else, but even the skull, you can see it as a skeleton. I feel like they really missed out on making another skeleton, or making a red-black skeleton creature, skeleton horse, a red-black skeleton commander. But it does have haste, and while it attacks while saddled, choose a non-legendary creature that saddled it this turn, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of it. Sacrifice that token at the beginning of the next end step. Repeat this process once, and it does saddle for 1. This could be good in more casual Corvold decks where you want to try and keep making, specifically me, I make goblin tokens, so if I would copy a Siege Gang commander to where I can make 2 more tokens, stuff like that, and it does sacrifice, so it would play, the token does sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step, so you would get the trigger off of Corvold too. Sacrifice decks would probably want this. Any other decks that come to mind? Horse decks. This would actually go great in a horse deck because there's what is that one from Amonkhet that makes you copy if you gain life? I think it's at the end of turn, but still, I mean, horses get double indestructible, so now Calamity now has indestructible, and you could just keep swinging for fun. Ooh, that's actually a cool build. Now that I think about it, I'm glad this isn't black, red. This could actually slide into horse decks very easily, especially with Shadowfax as the commander. Oh man, that's actually pretty cool. Drover Grizzly for 2 and a green. This is a 4/2 bear mount, but it looks more like a bear lizard or a cactus bear. I might have to pass on this one too. I'd have to walk. Whenever Drover Grizzly attacks while saddled, creatures you control gain trample until end of turn. And it does saddle for 1. Good ability for a saddle for a mount creature. Would you run it in your bigger go tall decks? I don't know, because we do already have multiple different enchantments that are harder to get rid of than creatures. And yeah, they can blow this up before you go to combat. And well, guess what? You just tapped a creature to saddle a creature that's no longer there. But that's the problem with all saddle creatures and vehicles in general. The giant beaver. I'm not going to comment on whether ride or walk on this one. For a 3 and a green, it's a 4/4 beaver mount with vigilance. Whenever it attacks while saddled, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature that saddled it this turn, and it saddles for 3. This is another one of those +1/+1 counter themed cards. Whether you want to put it in or replace it with one that would do more +1/+1 counters. I mean, 4 is a pretty hard spot to try to slot a creature in that just puts a counter on it once a turn. Puts counters on a creature once a turn. So this would be a budget include if anything else, just in my opinion. And this is probably one of my other favorites, the Rambling Possum. And you can definitely see that the South is in me strong. For 2 and a green, this is a 3/3 possum mount. And whenever it attacks while saddled, it gets +1/+2 until end of turn. Then you may return any number of creatures that saddled it this turn to their owner's hand, and it saddles for 1. For 3 mana, you get a 3/3. It's pretty cool. You can saddle for 1, but you can add more to it. And then you would bounce those creatures to your hand. This would be great in like elf fall decks, like Marwyn. I think that's her name. The green elf that counts elves. Whenever an elf enters the battlefield, you could put a counter on her. This could actually be really good in decks like that, in my opinion. This is a tough spot because there are a lot of ETBs that you could do in a deck like this too, and maybe in a Meren deck if you wanted to save those creatures or something like that. LTBs and ETBs would be great with this mount. Definitely would have to go on ahead and jump on. This would. I don't care about the spines. I don't care about the cactus on its head. We're taking a possum for a ride. Stubborn Burrow Fiend. This is a Badger Beast mount. For 1 and a green, it's a 2/2. I don't know, you know the old saying as it goes, nobody messes with the honey badger. And I don't think I would want to take the chance. Because whenever it becomes saddled for the first time each turn, mill 2 cards and then it gets +X where X, until end of turn where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. This could possibly be another one of those cards from Meren if they're looking to try and capitalize on going more aggro in decks where you're just throwing creatures into the graveyard with green. Gerard could use cards like this. And it does saddle for 2, so it's not a big, you're not going too deep into it. Would definitely have to pass and walk on this one. Ornery Tumblewag for 2 and a green. This is a 2/2 Brushwag mount, and I do love me a good Brushwag. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Whenever it attacks while saddled, double the number of +1/+1 counters on target creature, and it does saddle for 2. This one would most definitely settle into counter +1/+1 counter decks, especially if you can find a way to start throwing counters on the Tumblewag itself. Because once it starts getting too big, it's gonna be just too hard to block. And they probably will go on ahead and remove it. Ride or walk on this one. Well, we can ride on this one. We could go through some cactus. Through the cactus lands on a Brushwag. Congregation Griff. For 1 a green and a white. This is a 1/4 Hippogriff mount. And I'm just going to have to say it. I'm not big on Hippogriffs or anything that has a regular, it's got a horse body with a feathered tail, wings, and a crane neck and face, head. I don't know. I just don't feel like no. And plus, your boy here is afraid of heights, so that is definitely a no. Which, I mean, sometimes you gotta fly when you gotta fly. So, I mean, I've flown before, but I don't mean I liked it. It does have flying and lifelink. And whenever it attacks while saddled, it gets +X until end of turn where X is the number of mounts you control, and it does saddle for 3. So, the toughness is going to get huge if you have enough mounts in a mount deck. This will definitely be like the lead creature in a mount deck. But, I mean, we only have, 16 odd mounts in the format. So, I mean, it's not like we got a whole lot to choose from. This is probably better in a standard deck. But still, I mean, lifelink and flying, it's got evasion, it's got, it helps you stay alive to get your game plan going. Yeah, definitely would have to walk on this one. Seraphic Steed for a green and a white. This is a 2/2 unicorn mount with first strike lifelink. Whenever it attacks while saddled, create a 3/3 white angel creature token with flying, and for some odd reason it saddles for 4. This one, I would take this one out. I'd take it out of the pen. The art, this one kind of threw me off at first because I thought, oh, well, it's got wings. No, that is the clouds in the background showing wings, which, due to just my interpretation, is showing that the angel is coming behind it, which is a pretty cool representation. I kind of like the art on this one. Not big on unicorns, but unicorn makes an angel when it attacks. It's still pretty good though. And finally, we have the Gitrog Ravenous Ride for 3, a black and a green. This is a 6/5 legendary creature frog Horror mount with trample and haste. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice a creature that's saddled at this turn. If you do, draw X cards, then put up to X land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, where X is the sacrifices creature's power, and it does saddle for 1. I have seen a little bit of gameplay on this one, and this one is already wild. It's a great creature, especially in Marin decks where you're wanting to sacrifice creatures. But you might want to you probably have to change your game plan because you're going a little bit taller to take advantage of all the sacrifice. Ride or walk, I'm unfortunately probably gonna have to walk on this one because I'm not big on frogs, and this one looks like it could swallow me whole. Compared to the size of the horse that's right beside it, it looks like it could eat that horse in one bite. I think Thalia is the only one that could ride the Gitrog. But that is going to be it for today, everybody. I really appreciate everybody that likes, comments, and subscribe to the channel. I could not have done it without you guys. And that's going to be it. And I will see you guys next time in the graveyard.